I just love dogs. You know, the trust and the commitment, oh, it's predictable and it's secure. And at a time like this, it's tough on everybody, it's mighty important. Well, unless you have a behavior disorder with the dog, like severe anxiety or sudden onset of fear, that can take an otherwise normal dog and turn them dangerous. These are complex issues. Let's make some sense of this. By the way, in case we haven't met, I'm veterinarian Dr. Jeff Nickel, along with our border collie, Miss America, and our cats, Tony and Gaston. And they're here because they always show up for these things, even when it's not about cats. And so, if you find that this information is helpful, would you hit the heart button just so that I know I'm doing something valuable? And if you can hear me loud and clear, hit the wow button so that I know that technically we haven't, screwed this up. And also, if you know anybody who has a dog who might have this kind of aggression problem, put their name in the comment line so they can get notified and they may learn something valuable about their dog. So let me ask you, do you have a dog who's done this where you think everything's all right and suddenly you get a growl or a snap or a bite? These things are tough on us emotionally. That's an understatement, isn't it? Because we love these guys. And to have that kind of thing happen can really damage the relationship, and you don't know what to do. And it's very normal and understandable that people would get angry. Here you're in an emotional state where you're actually relying on your dog to give you back the love that you're sharing with her. And you all of a sudden get betrayed. At least that's how it feels. And feelings are everything, aren't they? So what do? The first impulse for a lot of people is to reprimand very strongly. Some people will hit or punish other ways. And the trouble with that approach is that it does not take into account why this is happening. There are lots of different reasons why aggression can occur. A mother dog with puppies, territorial aggression, protective aggression, possessive aggression. There's about a dozen different kinds in dogs. But by far and away, not in every case, but the great majority of the aggression cases I see in my behavior practice are dogs who are driven by fear. And while fear and anxiety are not the same thing, if you've got an anxiety problem, thank you, Carolyn, if you have an anxiety problem with your dog, then fear can be just around the corner. And we can inadvertently trigger our dog's fear, and so can other people. And we're going to talk about that. But I want to share a story with you, and I've typed out the high points because I don't want to miss anything. It's a little bit complicated, but you'll understand how these details fit together and why this thing went the way it did. This is a 3-year-old hound, mixed bred female spayed dog. Her name is Remy, and her people, a couple in their 50s, and they are Myrna and Bob. And I had to check the names because the truth is that's not really their names at all. I've changed them, okay? But I'm going to call them Myrna and Bob, and I'm going to call their dog Remy. So here's the history. So Remy came to me after having been adopted from a shelter about 5 months earlier, and she was about 3 years old at the time. This wasn't that long ago. And these folks live on a farm. We're lucky in Albuquerque. We have areas right around town that are like rural or semi-rural. And like, for example, in our neighborhood, we take our walks with Miss America here on an irrigation ditch, and there are cattle, and there are ducks in the ditch, and there are people with goats and people riding horses. And it's like old McDonald's farm, I suppose. Anyway, so here's Remy. And when she was first adopted, she was afraid of their house. She wouldn't go in. And when they finally succeeded in coaxing her in, she didn't want to go out. So you can see that even if a dog's well house trained, that's kind of a non-starter, isn't it? Well, by the time I saw them, actually, they'd resolved most of that, which was a good sign to me because it showed that this dog's fear could be overcome by a couple of very well-intentioned people who, frankly, didn't have the knowledge yet to really apply good information. That's why they came to me, and they succeeded anyway. So we knew that we had something to work with here, but that wasn't the worst of the problem. Anyway, so she was still afraid. She wasn't afraid of the house anymore, but she was afraid to pass through the doorway. And she wanted to be in her crate as a den, as a secure den. These folks had a wire crate, but they'd covered it with a sheet, so it had that snug den-like feel that's so valuable to dogs. And they also did the right thing by leaving the door of the crate open. They did not confine Remy to the inside of the crate, because naturally dogs are denning creatures who always can choose to enter or exit their crate, and Remy had those options, which she definitely needed. But she was still afraid to go in there, but when she got in there, she was okay. So you can see that, boy, almost anything would trigger this dog's fear. Now, they'd already taken her to their regular general practicing veterinarian, and I practiced general medicine for a long time, but when I finished my behavior residency, I limited my practice to behavior disorders, but I get it. So they went to the general practitioner up in Santa Fe, and they're in the exam room, and the nurse comes in, and it's a young lady, a staff member, and women actually have sometimes a better way with creatures because they're typically smaller than men. Women's movements are more graceful typically. Their voice is more evenly modulated. This has all been studied. And when the doctor came in, and of course I know these folks because I know most every veterinarian in Albuquerque and Santa Fe and throughout New Mexico. There are a whole lot of us here. The doctor came in, and he's male, and so he walked up to examine Remy, and she immediately retreated into a corner, and he made the mistake of just continuing to advance toward her because he needed to examine her, and she lunged at him and snapped. Not a good thing to try to bite your doctor, right? But what happens with a dog like Remy is a sudden switch goes off in the brain with an immediate release of adrenaline and other excitatory neurotransmitters from the fear center of the brain, right back here, right there, back, Miss America, show everybody your head. There you go, right back there, okay? And it floods the prefrontal thinking part of the brain, and Remy was in no position to make a choice. She simply reacted out of fear. So, what are we going to do with this thing? Well, there's more, okay? Oh, thank you. Thank you for telling me I'm doing something helpful here. I appreciate that. So anyway, when she was at home, if Myrna, her female person, took her outside to eliminate, she wouldn't have a problem. But if Bob, her husband, went out with them to just accompany them out to the yard, Remy would not eliminate. Just his presence was enough to cause her to be just too agitated, too nervous to urinate or defecate. I mean, this is a pretty scared dog. So, and then they would sit on their portal and have dinner. Here in Albuquerque and Santa Fe, we have nice weather. You can sit out in the evening. And she would beg for table food. But she was always nervous at those times. And she would take food that they would offer her, even from Bob, as long as he was sitting. If he was standing, no way was she going to take that path. Well, when a person is standing, they appear bigger to the dog, and hence there's a greater perception of a threat. You think, wait a minute here. These were nice people, by the way. It's very clear that they didn't do anything to intentionally they just didn't scare the dog by deliberately, but simply Bob being male, and Bob's a big man. He's 6'4", probably weighs 220, and it's like most men. We walk around like a bunch of lumberjacks, and we have these booming voices and these choppy movements, and if you're a scared dog, that can be a problem, especially compared with a soft, gentle, quieter, smaller woman, which of course was the case here. So there's more. So Bob and Myrna, they sleep in the same bed, right? Well, Myrna usually would go to bed earlier and read, so she's laying on the bed reading, and she has Remy on the bed with her. So then Bob gets ready for bed, and he walks into the bedroom, and what's Remy doing? She's barking and growling and lunging at him in his own bedroom. Well, we can't have that now, can we? So what do we do about that? Well, of course, the issue is that Remy can be possessive of the bed. Some dogs, frankly, don't belong on their person's bed because they get confused by it. But the trouble also is that the bedroom is a room, and the trouble with rooms, like the one I'm sitting in now, is they have walls. Well, the problem with confined spaces like this is that many dogs, they come into a house and they go, gee, I'm evolutionarily adapted for living in open spaces where I can always create distance from anything that might trigger a little fear, and then they're in a confined area like a room, and where the heck are they going to go? I mean, that happened to Remy when she was in the exam room and the doctor approached her. So here we are in the bedroom, and her own male person, Bob, is walking in, and that was a big part of her aggressive reaction to Bob. And that's the big thing that triggered them to make an appointment and bring them in. So, there's more. Okay? Whenever Bob went to leave for work, and he left home first to go to his job, when he would get ready to go, he would notice that Remy was watching and preparing to leave. And as he headed for the door, every single time, she lunged to her feet and chased after him to chase him out of the house, hair standing up over her shoulders and rump, an indicator of severe agitation in dogs. You know, like the saying about people made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Well, it's the same physiologic, neurologic response in a human that causes that to occur in a dog. And you might see that in some dogs. And if you have seen that in a dog, put it in the comment line and tell me about it, and we'll address it while we're talking about this. So, they didn't know what to do with this. And, you know, they're you know, scolding her and doing whatever they thought they needed to do, and of course none of it helped. And we know why, of course, because every response that a dog gets for one of its leaders is regarded as a validation of the dog's behavior and its emotional state of the moment. So if you want your dog to be calm, then when she's calm, that's when you're touching him or her and petting, and the dog says, I'm earning these interactions with my person. And if I'm calm when I earn them, I'm going to keep going to that job because it keeps paying. Okay? So if you see a behavior you don't want, it needs to get no response at all. Now, there are ways of controlling a dog, and I'll explain that in a minute, but you absolutely don't respond because you would simply be accelerating down the wrong path. So we've got a big problem here with fear of people, of big people, unfamiliar people, and the trouble that Bob had was that without meaning to, early in the time that they had Remy in their home, without knowing it, he moved around, he spoke, and his behavior completely by accident triggered a fear reaction in Remy. And every time he moved after that, it triggered the same thing. It was classical conditioning, Pavlovian, emotion-based. And of course, he got off on the wrong foot with his dog right from the get-go. Had he known at the beginning what I taught him when I saw them, we might have been able to sidestep this. And that may be why this story could be helpful at your house. So, again, tell me if you have a dog like this or you know somebody who does, and put their name in the comment line so they can get a notice that this information could be valuable. So here's what I told Bob. I said, never approach, reach for, lean over, or stare at Remy. Ever. In her whole life. Because these triggered the dog's fear and its unhealthy reactions. Now, Bob never meant anything but the best for this dog. He loved her, and he still does. But what the heck was he going to do? Well, he's going to have to set her up for success. That's what he has to do. And so one of the things I told him was that to have Myrna take Remy in another room, and then he was to go into the living room and lie down on the floor and just spread a few dog treats around him. And if Remy's meal was withheld before these little exercises, she'd be a little more food motivated. And then Myrna would let Remy out, and she would walk into the living room, and here's Bob looking small because he's lying on the floor, right? And there's not much to be worried about then. And look, around Bob are these tasty treats. So we're going to use classical conditioning to our advantage in a different way now. And she's going to come near Bob and go, Bob, you look interesting, and look at all this nifty food that's right around you. So she picks up these little snacks. She's hungry anyway, and she's pretty tasty, and she begins to associate a relaxed, pleasurable emotional state with being near Bob. Now, admittedly, she's learning those emotions and those associations with him when he's small and lying down. What do we do when he has to stand up? I mean, the poor guy can't live his life, you know, slithering around on the floor, right? And wiggle his way out of the house to go to work in the morning, okay? But we had to start someplace, and we've got to start by teaching this dog that the scent and the appearance of this man, he's a good guy, okay? And good things happen when he's around. Many people make the mistake of saying, this dog is afraid of me, so I'm going to, you know, come on, baby, come on, and they approach the dog and try to reach toward the dog with food, and the dog's going, oh my goodness, and they get overwhelmed. So you have to understand where the dog is coming from, and you know, this is about empathy, isn't it? I mean, if these two people didn't have genuine kindness in their hearts, they probably would have taken this dog back immediately because she clearly was a challenging situation right from the beginning. but they were kind, and they were going to help this dog, and they knew early on, and they told me this, that they knew that they might be this dog's only hope, because how many people are there out there who would invest themselves in a dog like this? Well, the other thing that Bob and Myrna have going for them is empathy. They know how to walk a mile in the other creature's moccasins, if you will. In this case, it's a dog, and dogs are not little people in furry suits. There are many aspects of their behavior that are very similar to ours. And of course, that's what makes them man's and women's best friends. But they've got some significant differences. And they came to me because they realized that what they were trying to do to make a difference for this dog just wasn't getting him anyplace. So I said, let's set her up for success. So I also told them to leave a leash attached to Remy's collar all the time, so that she's just dragging this 6-foot leash around the house. We call it a drag line because the dog's dragging it around. And when she needed to be managed at a time when she was not behaving appropriately, usually because she was overwhelmed with fear, that they could lead her out of a situation and create distance. Because with greater distance from a fear trigger, there is always going to be less arousal. And that's a very big part of setting her up for success. This idea that you continue to thrust a scared dog into a fear-provoking situation, it's a formula for failure. There's a behavioral name for that. It's called flooding. And it is similar to if you had a 10-year-old child who was deathly afraid of the water, and you took him up to the 10-meter diving platform at a big indoor pool with a diving pit. We've all seen those. And you push him off, right? And he hits the water and survives. And then you haul him back up there and do it repeatedly. That's called flooding. It is overwhelming the individual with the fear stimulus, hoping that at some point they'll go, oh, okay, I guess I can survive. Well, occasionally that works. It's generally a bad gamble. And in fact, in the case of Remy, these folks were actually flooding before they came in because they didn't realize what they were doing. Because what was happening was that Bob continued to get up and walk around and go to work in the morning. And every time the stimulus was the same and the reaction from the dog was the same. So instead, we have a drag line on her. And Myrna's job before Bob went to work was to pick up the drag line, say nothing, we're ignoring, and walk to another room. And following behind her is a fully ignored dog, a hound dog named Remy, who we're fully ignoring, so she doesn't exist. So Bob goes ahead and he goes out the door. And at the beginning, all we're doing is avoiding Remy's exposure to that fear trigger of seeing Bob leave. Okay? She was so afraid of him, she was going to chase him. But when he turned to face her, the fear caused her to say, oh no, I'm not doing that. Well, we needed to make a big difference in this, and by the way, we did. So we could manage her, set her up for success, not failure, by ignoring her ramp up in arousal and simply creating distance so she felt better. Okay? Now, what we're doing is we're doing what's called response substitution. And I've talked before about clicker and target training a dog, and they did that on my advice. But here's one more thing that they did. They used this thing called a treat and train. Let me show you this. This device, I know if you can read backwards, this is Manners Minder. The company changed its name at one point. You put dog treats in this thing. You open up the top and you put the dog treats inside. And you can see there's sort of an auger here. And this thing works on a one-button remote control. And what you do is you teach the dog that when you say the command place, or you can teach a dog to go to the mat that's parked in front of the treat and train when it hears the doorbell or a knock at the door. This is great for dogs who rush the door and raise a big ruckus when the UPS delivery person comes, or a guest come. So the dog learns to run to the mat that's always on the floor in front of the treat and train, and as soon as that dog's elbows touch the floor and it's in a full down position, then you push the remote button and this thing spits out a treat. It beeps and it spits out a treat. So what Myrna did and Bob was that they taught Remy that this thing would always be parked in the same location in their house, and the mat was always in front of it. And when Bob was ready to go to work, then Myrna would say, Remy, place. And before he started heading for the door, which was the big trigger, his movement toward the door, Remy would say, I've learned this lesson, I've done this hundreds of times. She would run, lay down on the mat, Myrna would push the button, and out would come a treat. And then she might do it again a time or two. In the meantime, Bob's just peacefully exiting the house. So Bob's much happier because who wants a great big old hound dog? This dog was like 65 pounds, still is. And chasing after him, possibly nip him on the rear end. I mean, that's not fun for anybody, right? And so instead, this dog's having a wonderful time. And nobody's reprimanding. And the dog has learned that when I see this, this stimulus, this trigger, in other words, Bob leaving, my old default reaction was to chase him. We've abandoned that foolishness. She has a new default. See Bob ready to go, look to Myrna and say, Myrna. And Myrna goes, yeah, we have a routine here, Remy. We have a ritual. Remy, place. Remy runs over, camps out in front of the treat-in train, and bang, she gets a treat. And Bob's gone. Okay? So what we're not doing is trying to teach Myrna to stop chasing Bob, or I'm sorry, Remy. Myrna's his wife. She might chase him too. None of my business. Anyway, so Remy, we're not trying to say, stop that, Remy. Because if we scold her and reprimand her and try to make her stop doing that behavior that nobody wants, what's the cause of that? Well, you can scold and punish and reprimand fear all you want, and you're not going to make that fear go away. But we can replace it with an entirely different behavior, which is what they did. Now, there's one more thing that I had them do, and I want to tell you about that. And that is this thing. It's called a calmer canine device. In fact, let me, here, I'll turn the camera around and I'll show it to you from the other side. And this is one of the greatest things that ever come along in a long time. You see that? Can you read that? It says calmer canine. There we go. And Diane, thank you for coming. It's nice to see you. So what we had is this calmer canine, and there is this nice comfy cloth little vest, they call it. This little thing goes around the dog's neck and another little cloth strap around her chest, and you stick it together with Velcro, and then this little Velcro patch on the back of this pulse electromagnetic field device sits right behind the dog's head, just like this. Miss America, honey, can you sit up so people can see? Thank you, darling. Sits like this. It looks like a halo. Isn't that nice? Anyway, 2 treatments a day, 15 minutes long each. You push the button, and the light blinks so you can tell that it's functioning, and it turns itself off in 15 minutes. And the dog can be with you. They can walk around the house wearing this thing. So you're having breakfast in the morning, you're watching TV or answering your email in the evening. A course of treatment is usually 4 to 6 weeks, and this is an excellent way of reducing anxiety. Now, it's FDA approved for use for dogs with separation anxiety, but anxiety is frankly anxiety, and it makes a difference with many anxious dogs. And I'll tell you what, Remy was anxious. There was almost everything made her anxious. Unless Bob was lying on his back on the floor, she was anxious. And this made a big difference in setting her up for success. So, you're welcome, Diane. So anyway, these folks did very well. And they did well not just because I was able to provide them with research-based recommendations. Everything that we do in behavior medicine is like everything else in medicine. If it does not have a scientific, published, peer-reviewed support, we don't do it. All right? We don't make stuff up. So I was able to give them things that had a strong likelihood of working, including diminishing the anxiety with a pulse electromagnetic field. This is the Calmer Canine, by the way. Go to Calmer, C-A-L-M-E-R, the letter K, the number 9.com, calmerk9.com, and you can learn more about it. And by the way, they're on sale right now. And if there's a coupon code box, and if you put my first name, Jeff, in the coupon code box, they'll give you an extra 15% off. So anyway, this was really valuable. And there are people who their dogs chase people out the door. I know people where the dog, particularly small dogs, if a person's walking out the door, the dog can grab the back of their pant leg, and people think, oh, the dog doesn't want them to leave. No, the dog wants them to leave. It's scared to death. And we need to set these pets up for success. Well, there's lots of different reasons why dogs can become aggressive. And one of those things is food. Many dogs are completely normal in all other ways, but you go near their food and you might have a problem. And there are those who say, oh, every dog should allow people to take its food away from it. So when it's a puppy or at any point, you allow the dog to eat and then grab the food. Does anybody know a dog like that? Well, let me tell you something about that. That's like a sting operation. Dogs are possessive about food for a very important reason. One of the reasons that this species has thrived through millennia in the harshest of conditions in all places on the globe is because, among many things, they are geared for the concept of scarcity. In other words, if I don't get all of it, I won't get any of it. And it doesn't matter whether your dog gets a great meal of the finest quality food twice daily, every day, and you've got a perfectly excellent income stream, and your dog has nothing to worry about, and you think, why in the world would this dog protect its food? Surely it knows that I'm never going to fail to feed him, because it's a dog, that's why. So allow your dog to be a dog. Be empathic. He's different. There are a lot of people different than I am, and one of my challenges is to remember that, okay? Well, we have to remember that about other species like cats and dogs. They're different, all right? So don't take a dog's food. There's just absolutely no percentage in it. There are people who believe that you're supposed to establish dominance, that the dog needs to know that you're the alpha or whatever alphabet that you're using, Greek or French or whatever. No. Your dog knows you're the leader. Respect your dog for what he or she is, and allow your dog to have some choices. And one of those things is to eat in peace, for crying out loud. And if one of us, by the way, after we get all of our social restrictions lifted, if anybody who's watching this now is sitting having lunch with me in a restaurant sometime, and you reach over and start taking food off my plate, well, I might behave that way myself. So don't do that. And I won't eat off your plate either. So human beds, I mentioned that a little bit. There are dogs who do fine with that. But you know, they recognize that their person's bed is their den. It's the highest, most coveted location in the entire home. And from a dog's perspective, in their way of thinking in the canine social group, there's only one reason that they would be invited into their leader's den, which is for something that's not going to happen in a human home, and that's breeding purposes. So the dog is on the person's bed, and the dog's saying, what the heck am I doing here? And they can get anxious, and they can also start to get an inappropriate idea that maybe they actually own that location, and you're setting them up for failure. So yes, people have been growled at, lunged at, bitten on their beds, and sometimes, particularly if there's more than one dog on the bed, and they compete for proximity to their leader, or the person's half asleep and straightens their leg and bumps their dog with their foot. I mean, this is a setup for failure. So in general, I urge people, don't let your dog on your bed. The best place to snuggle with your dog if you want to lie down and really relax is do what Bob did. Lie on the floor. Your dog, that's not anybody's inner sanctum, and that is a neutral area, and that your dog's going to say, wow, I love it when you're relaxed and on the floor, and we can snuggle and have a wonderful time. And that's the safest thing to do behaviorally, and it is very unlikely to trigger the dog's reactive aggression. Now, of course, most of us don't have dogs who are going to bite. You know, this dog isn't going to bite, but there are some where, you know, you get that growl, and it's very easy to scold a dog or reprimand for growling, because we know that could lead to a bite. But don't teach a dog not to growl. If you punish a dog consistently when it growls, it can learn to stop growling, and then you have a dog who just might bite without warning. So that communication from your dog is not a bad thing. Anything for kitties. Mine just hides under my bed. Well, you know, Martha, yeah, cats are a different species altogether, and socially, they certainly have plenty in common with us. My cats are, looks like they're hunting for a treat some other place in my office here. Cats are not social in the same way that dogs are. The social rules are actually rather different. But yes, like dogs, they are denning creatures, and they will find a little quiet spot under something like a bed or a piece of furniture to hide out. And the worst thing you can do for a cat or a dog who's scared is to crawl around and pursue them and reach for them. Even if they don't become defensive, aggressive, all you're doing is ramping up their fear, and ramping up fear in association with you. And you need to be the safe person. And so the thing to do with that kitty is to don't put food under the bed, put food near the bed, and water and litter. And gradually you can move those things a little further away from the bed. And the other thing, as much as we love our pets, and we get them because we love pets, and you love that kitty and you want to spend more time with her, you have to wait and be patient. And in fact, have nothing really, no direct communication with that cat. No, in essence, you ignore that cat, except putting out food, fresh food, water, and litter, until that cat finally says, gee, Martha, you know, you're actually okay, and I think I'll come a little closer. And you can leave out food the way Bob did with Remy. And sometimes with cats, especially those who were raised as feral kittens by feral mothers, and in some cases they are not socialized, not adapted to humans. They didn't learn that people are okay and fun and you can be relaxed around them. They didn't learn that when they were babies. And with feral cats, sometimes you only make a moderate amount of improvement in the space of a lifetime. And you won't get any improvement if you're not super, super patient. So you really have to wait and allow the cat to come to you, which is one of the essences that I want to leave people with today, is that if you want to interact with a pet where your relationship has had its rough spots, then make it the pet's choice. They come to you because they want to earn something. They want to earn a resource. Gaston, would you like this biscuit? He says, no, I'd rather lick my leg. Oh, he's a cat. He was playing the fiddle here on the floor. So you make it their choice. And with dogs in particular, of course, there are folks who say, oh, don't reward your dog with food just for doing what you tell him, because then he's just using you. He's just, you know, you're bribing him. No, that's nonsense. Dogs look to their leaders as controlling all of their resources. That's exactly how they function with the leader of their free-living canine social group. They get permission to have access to all things that relate to survival in the wild, and they see us the same way. So they are more secure and more relaxed if they can function with their human leader the same way that they are innately programmed to function with a canine leader. So if we're going to be truly empathic and learn how they think and how they feel and what works best for them, then we get outside ourselves and we say, okay, you're a dog. What's the best leadership way to work with this? Well, if I want you to do something and you can earn a resource from me, that's exactly the way a dog thinks. And that brings them security. The dog does what you say, it earns a resource like food, and the dog goes, got it. This works. And they love you anyway, even though you're their leader. Okay? So, you know, just the takeaway also is kindness. You know, again, Bob and Myrna, they're kind people. And I know everybody who's shares these Facebook Lives with me is too, because you have pets. And I don't know that that makes us better than people who don't have pets, but we have something to share. And when we are kind with our pets and we recognize their differences and help them to be secure and relaxed in their human existence in our contrived house with its walls and fences and windows and things that they don't understand, and we work with them to set them up for success, well, we take away a reward, don't we, when we see the improvement? And we can take those lessons that we get from our pets and we can share them just in the way we treat other people. We can say to other people, in our minds, not verbally, but we can say, you're different. It's all right. I'm going to listen, and I'm going to see if I can understand how you're different and set you up for success and not punish you when you make a mistake. And boy, everybody does make mistakes, don't they? And I don't know about around your house, but here in Albuquerque, I think the drivers are a little bit nastier in some cases. People try to do the best they can, but they're stressed. And you and I probably are too. And our pets may be somewhat as a result of that. But we can share our kindness, though, can't we? And we can be empathic. And one little interaction at a time, people can be a little bit better just because they connected with us. So thank you for sharing this time with me. And I hope that if you're not a subscriber to my website, that you'll do that. If you go to drjeffnicol.com, drjeffnicol.com, at the bottom of the homepage, you can subscribe. It costs nothing. And every Tuesday morning, you will get my Facebook Live recording from the week prior, and you'll get my what we call a media blog, which is my newspaper column. It's usually question answer. It's in the Albuquerque Journal the week before, and I put it out for my subscribers every Tuesday morning, and you get that in your inbox. And when you do subscribe, I'll send you at no charge my at-home pet first aid and CPR guide, which they're worth printing out and keeping handy, because when those emergencies happen, you don't want to be hunting around looking for what do I do first. It's bullet pointed, very easy to use. So I hope you find this information helpful, and thank you. I want to bring out the best in pets and their people, and so thanks for being here. Miss America, say goodbye to our friends. Tony and Gaston are camped out on the floor. They were eating these little dental chews, and I guess they figure their teeth are in good enough shape they don't need any more of them. So thank you, and have a great week. And remember, wear your mask, keep 6 feet apart, and try to avoid gatherings in enclosed buildings.